The Mysterious Person, a true horror story. Introduction. Ashgrove was a town hidden away in the folds of time and wilderness, surrounded on all sides by an ancient, sprawling forest. Its people were warm but wary, their smiles often masking unease. Travelers passing through often spoke of the peculiar atmosphere, how the town seemed almost suspended in a perpetual twilight, where the sun struggled to break through the dense canopy of trees. Emma Hadley wasn't one to believe in ghost stories or local legends. A journalist by trade, she had built her career on exposing truths buried under layers of superstition and fear. But after a grueling year of high-pressure assignments, she found herself burned out. The noise and chaos of the city had become unbearable, and she craved solitude. A colleague had mentioned Ashgrove offhandedly during a lunch break, describing it as the kind of place where time stands still. Intrigued, Emma decided it would be the perfect retreat. She rented a small cabin on the outskirts of town, close to the edge of the forest. It was meant to be a month-long escape, a chance to recharge and perhaps even find inspiration for her next big story. But the moment she arrived, Emma felt a strange weight settle over her. The air was thick with an almost tangible tension, and the forest loomed like a living entity, its dark expanse seeming to watch her every move. Part 1. Arrival and First Encounters. The cabin was exactly as advertised, quaint and rustic, with creaking floorboards and a fireplace that looked like it hadn't been used in years. Emma spent her first day unpacking and familiarizing herself with the surroundings. She ventured into town to pick up groceries and introduced herself to a few locals. At the general store, she met an older woman named Margaret who ran the place. Margaret was friendly but guarded, her smile faltering when Emma mentioned the forest. "You'll want to stay clear of those woods," Margaret warned, her voice low. "Strangers who wander too deep don't always come back, and those who do, well, they're never the same." Emma laughed nervously, brushing off the comment. "I'm not planning on wandering too far. Just here to relax and maybe do a little writing." Margaret's expression softened, but her eyes remained wary. "Just be careful, dear. Sometimes the forest doesn't wait for you to go looking. It comes to you." The words lingered in Emma's mind as she returned to the cabin. She dismissed them as small-town superstition, a story designed to keep outsiders in line. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That night, as she sat by the fire with a cup of tea, she heard it, a faint rustling outside her window. She froze, her heart pounding. Peering through the curtain, she saw nothing but darkness. She told herself it was just the wind or a stray animal and tried to focus on the book in her hands. But the sound came again, louder this time. A soft, deliberate crunch of leaves, as if someone, or something, was circling the cabin. "Hello?" Emma called out, her voice trembling. "They'll all know my pain," Elias had reportedly said before his death. "None will escape the forest's grasp." Since then, there had been whispers of a figure known as the Watcher, a hooded entity said to appear to those who ventured too close to the heart of the forest. Some claimed the Watcher was Elias's vengeful spirit. Others believed it was something far older and darker, using Elias as a vessel. Emma was skeptical, but intrigued. The pieces of the story were fragmented, but they hinted at something sinister. She decided to dig deeper, questioning more locals about their experiences. Most were reluctant to talk, but a few shared chilling accounts, sightings of shadowy figures, eerie whispers, and a sense of being watched. One man, a reclusive woodworker named Tom, told her about his encounter. "I saw him once," Tom said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Late one night, when I was cutting through the forest to get home. He was just standing there at the edge of the path, hooded, face hidden. I ran as fast as I could, and when I looked back, he was gone. But I felt him watching me for days after, like he'd marked me." Part 3. Strange Sightings. The days in Ashgrove grew stranger as Emma continued her investigation. The whispers she heard on the first night became more frequent, faint but persistent, as though carried by the wind. At first she thought she was imagining it, a product of her tired mind. But by the end of her first week, she could no longer deny that something, or someone, was deliberately trying to unsettle her. On the seventh night, Emma woke abruptly. The room was dark except for the faint glow of moonlight filtering through the curtains. At first, she didn't know what had disturbed her. Then she heard it again, a soft, rhythmic tapping at the window. Her breath hitched as she stared at the window, the shadows outside shifting unnaturally. Slowly, she reached for her phone on the bedside table, turning on the flashlight. The beam of light landed on the window. For a moment, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Then she saw it, a handprint smeared across the glass as though someone had been pressing their palm against it moments ago. Emma's heart pounded. She scrambled out of bed, grabbing the pepper spray she had brought with her. She opened the front door cautiously, her flashlight illuminating the clearing. The forest loomed in the distance, its darkness impenetrable. "Who's out there?" she called, her voice shaking. The only response was silence. The next morning, she found muddy footprints circling the cabin. They were large, humanoid, but with odd, elongated toes, as if the person or creature walking had malformed feet. The sight sent a chill down her spine, but instead of deterring her, it only fueled her determination to uncover the truth. Part 4. The Stranger Appears. By the second week, Emma had begun cataloging her experiences in a journal. She wrote down every detail, the whispers, the footprints, the feeling of being watched. It was late one evening, as she sat by the fire reviewing her notes, that she heard a knock at the door. The sound was so unexpected that she froze, staring at the door as her pulse quickened. No one had visited her cabin since she arrived. The knock came again. Louder this time. Emma grabbed the pepper spray from the table and approached the door cautiously. "Who is it?" There was no response. Taking a deep breath, she unlocked the door and pulled it open. Standing on the porch was a figure draped in a dark, hooded cloak. Their face was obscured, hidden in shadow. "Who are you?" Emma demanded, her voice trembling. The figure raised a gloved hand, holding out a folded piece of paper. Slowly, Emma reached out and took it. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. As Emma unfolded the note, she glanced up, but the stranger was gone. They had vanished as silently as they had appeared. The note was written in shaky handwriting. "Leave before it's too late. The forest doesn't forgive." Part 5. Into the forest. Emma couldn't let the warning go unanswered. Driven by equal parts curiosity and defiance, she decided to venture into the forest the next morning. She packed a small bag with essentials, a flashlight, water, a first aid kit, and her notebook, and set out at dawn. The forest was eerily quiet, the usual sounds of birds and insects conspicuously absent. The deeper she went, the darker it became, the dense canopy blocking out the sunlight. She marked her path with bright orange tape, tying it to branches every few feet to ensure she wouldn't get lost. As she walked, Emma began to notice strange markings on the trees, symbols carved into the bark, intricate and unfamiliar. She took photos of them with her phone, her unease growing with every step. After hours of wandering, she came across a clearing. In the center stood a weathered stone altar, its surface covered in moss and dried blood. Surrounding the altar were the remnants of crude wooden effigies, some toppled over, others still standing. Part 6. The Discovery. Emma returned to the cabin with the locket clenched tightly in her hand, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the image of the hooded figure or the way it had pointed her to the altar. It wasn't just a random coincidence. Whatever was happening in Ashgrove was tied to her, and the locket was a piece of the puzzle. Sitting by the fireplace, she studied the photograph inside the locket. The man's face was sharp and weathered, his expression stern. The cabin behind him wasn't hers, but it looked similar, its roof sagging and the wood warped with age. There were symbols carved into the doorframe, the same ones she'd seen on the trees in the forest. Desperate for answers, Emma decided to visit the library again the next morning. She showed the photograph to Henry, the librarian. "This man, do you recognize him?" she asked. Henry's face paled as he stared at the photograph. "Where did you get this?" "I found it in the forest near an altar," Emma replied. Henry hesitated before speaking. "That's Elias Grayson, the man accused of cursing this town." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "This is the hermit?" Henry nodded. "He lived deep in the forest, far from anyone. Some said he practiced dark magic, others claimed he was just a recluse. But after a string of deaths in the town, livestock, then people, the townsfolk turned on him. They burned his home to the ground with him inside." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. "And the curse?" Henry leaned in closer, his voice low. "They say the forest itself is the curse now. Those symbols you've seen, they're warnings, meant to keep people away. But not everyone listens. Some get drawn in, and the forest takes them. They say Elias's spirit walks there, bound by his rage and grief, trapping anyone who dares to enter." Emma sat back, her thoughts spinning. "Then who, or what, is the Watcher?" Henry's expression darkened. "Some think it's Elias himself. Others believe it's something older, something that claimed him when he died. Either way, if it's watching you, it means you've been marked." The figure stepped closer, and for the first time, Emma saw its face, or what was left of it. The flesh was pale and decayed, its eyes hollow voids. "I am bound to this place," it said, its voice echoing. "But you don't belong here. Leave, before the forest takes you too." Emma shook her head, clutching the journal. "I know what you are. You're Elias. You curse this town, but it's the forest that's controlling you. You don't have to do this anymore." The figure hesitated, as if Emma's words had struck a chord. But then its voice grew harsher. "The forest does not forgive. It does not let go. You've seen too much. You are already marked." The shadows surged toward Emma, and she turned and fled, bursting out of the cabin into the forest. The trees seemed to close in around her, the path twisting and changing. The whispers grew louder, turning into a deafening roar. Part 9. Breaking the Curse. Emma's flashlight flickered and died, plunging her into darkness. But in the distance, she saw a faint glow. The altar. She ran toward it, the locket still clutched in her hand. As she reached the altar, the hooded figure appeared again, this time surrounded by swirling shadows. "End this!" Emma shouted, holding up the locket. "You don't have to serve the forest anymore. You can fight it." The figure paused, its form flickering. For a moment, Emma thought she saw the man Elias once was, his face filled with anguish. "The forest is stronger than me," he said. "Stronger than you." Emma remembered the symbols carved into the trees, the door frame, the pedestal. They were warnings, but they were also seals. She realized what she had to do. Pulling out her notebook, she sketched the symbols in reverse, using a stick to carve them into the dirt around the altar. The ground trembled, and the shadows recoiled. The figure let out a scream, its voice filled with both pain and relief. The shadows dissolved, and the forest grew still. Conclusion. Emma woke at the edge of the forest, the locket still in her hand. The cabin was gone, as though it had never existed. The townsfolk didn't remember her, and when she tried to tell them what had happened, they looked at her as if she were mad. Driving away from Ashgrove, Emma glanced in the rearview mirror. At the edge of the forest, a hooded figure stood, watching her. But this time it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a farewell. Moral curiosity can uncover the truth, but not all truths are meant to be known. Some mysteries are best left undiscovered.